there's two camps. There's the salesperson who wants to do everything, and they botch up the whole operations side, or there's a salesperson who doesn't even pay attention to operations. So
65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So if you come from that environment, you've got this like DIY mentality, like I need to keep every single penny. Where what's interesting is that the richest people on planet Earth, they don't own 100% of their businesses. I remember you looked at me and you were like, babe, like if you want to stay married, we need to like figure this out. Welcome back to another episode of the Carla Novello podcast. We have with us an absolute rock star. Somebody who's not only beautiful, she's intelligent, she's exceptionally capable, and she's an operations beast. And the reason why I wanted to have her on the platform is because she is so wonderful. Also, we have a tendency to focus on only the salespeople, and without the operations people, we wouldn't be able to do this. So welcome, everybody. 17 years plus in the business, 2,000 plus transactions. My wonderful wife, the Miss Carla Novello. Appreciate you being with us, babe.
thanks for having me, babe.
Yeah, anytime. You know what I mean? So I appreciate you taking the time. I know your time's really valuable because you do a lot of things, not only in the business, but with family. And I thought it was really important to, really look at the perspective of operations, because my experience has been, in which I've told people forever, is that you have been in many ways like the secret weapon, and that you're the equivalent of me in sales, just in operations. And, it was just me and you doing 100 deals and you were doing all the operations side. So I guess first, let's talk about like your journey into real estate. So, how you happened to get started in real estate, and then we'll jump into systems, because I know you feel that systems are sexy, and so do I.
Yeah, well, I graduated from UF with a degree in public relations. I really had no idea what I wanted to do with it. So when I graduated, I took a job at the Princeton Review, which is like a test preparation company, and they offered me an amazing salary of $18,000, which, I mean, at the time, it did pay all of our bills. But I could do better. So when you started selling real estate right off the bat, you were turning and burning some deals. It was the height of the market, and you really needed some help, because the sales part doesn't really work if there's no one to service them. So I decided just to come and help. I thought maybe for a year or two, and then I'd go, back to my field. But long story short, we've been working together for over 15 years, and it's been amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome. And, what's interesting is that, the tendency for a lot of folks, when they get into real estate, is to not even think about the operations side. They spend all of their time focused on generating income, which is cool. I help a lot of people, learn how to do that. Yet without the operations, I see that it creates like stagnation. So talk a little bit about, why systems are so important, and talk a little bit about what you saw, like when you jumped in and started to help me, like immediately, what were some of the systems that you started to put into place?
All right. Well, I like to think of systems helping with 3 S's. So they help you get more sales, they help you to simplify, so that takes away mistakes, and they help you to scale it. So once you have good systems, you can teach other people to do the same things. And really, one of the biggest mistakes that I think we made at the beginning was that I was trying to do everything, and I was just spread too thin. And I think if we would have hired sooner, we would have grown a lot faster. So I think some of the things that really require someone with specialized knowledge is the transaction coordinator, because they know a lot about lending, they have to know a lot about title, they have to have a really thick skin, and they have to be available all the time, which I wasn't at the time. Also showings, like a showing service that actually does the showings for you, because nobody is available 24/7, and you don't want to get in the way of a showing. It needs to be easy to show a property. Also photography. A photographer is going to take way better pictures than you are on your phone. So that was another big thing that we delegated.
Yeah, well, the other is like listing coordination.
Yes. inputting the listings. I mean, we have this notion that we are going to do it better than someone else is, but the reality is most of these things are really easily trainable if you just document them. It's really easy to show someone else, and it is so valuable because our time is our greatest asset.
Yeah, 100%. So, you alluded to the fact that, you know, I remember like kind of from a training perspective, it was more like, this listing needs to be inputted, like go figure that out. And I remember
Yeah.
being in a tiny room with you. It was maybe like 100 square feet. There was no like windows, and my back would be to you, and I'd be prospecting, and you would be behind me, like trying to figure out how to input listings and all that stuff. So, um, as far as like those systems are concerned, you mentioned that you were trying to do them all yourself, which brings up two things for me. One is that agents try to do that while simultaneously trying to like list and sell property, which is virtually impossible. And then you like at that time you were the system. So for people that are listening, they need to understand that like you were doing transaction coordination, scheduling showings, taking pictures, putting lock boxes out, putting signs out, like listing. You were doing all of that. Is that right?
Yeah, and answering the phone. So after I would be out on the field, I would have to come back to the office and there'd be 20 messages on agents asking me like, "What are the HOA dues?" and stuff that's not even important. So, yeah, I was doing a lot.
That was in many ways like a superpower. It's what allowed us to go from 0 to 105 years because we clearly separated those two pieces, and we had two people that were very capable in those two areas. So we could just I could focus on PLAN, prospect, lead, follow up, go on appointments, negotiate deals, and you're like this beast as far as systems are concerned, and we were able to do that. And then what I'm aware of is we also began to hit a ceiling because what happened, as you were describing that, it made me reflect on it, is that me and you can only do so much as an individual. So you began to notice, even though you're super capable and you could do all of those jobs that people try to separate and have a bunch of people do, you were doing them all yourself. But around like 100 transactions, I remember you looked at me and you were like, babe, like, if you want to stay married, we need to like figure this out. And I'm like, okay. So
Yeah.
like, what was that awareness for you? And then like, what did you do to deal with that?
Well, the awareness was that it sucked. Like it's not fun. It leads to burnout because one person's not going to be able to do all those jobs well. So then you start to see all the cracks. You start to hear the complaints. Oh, you didn't get back to me soon enough. Oh, I need this. You just spread really thin. So I think, I mean, it also coincided with the birth of our first child. It's like once that happened, I was like, okay, this is the sign. We need to delegate. And that's when we got our transaction coordinator. And she's been with us for 12 years now. And that was a huge difference. Just that. I mean, she does it 10 times better than I could have ever done it.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it came in stages, right? I think part of that was that initial bootstrap stage where like we weren't kind of paying anybody to do stuff. It was just me and you, and we kept it real lean and mean. And then as time progressed, and it's like, wait a minute, like there's only so much of us, and if we want to have other areas in our life from a personal perspective, we need some help. And it started with transaction coordination, and then it continued with listing coordination, right? So
Right.
talk a little bit about, so once we hired a transaction coordinator and you had already created, we were talking about this yesterday on a walk. It's like you already created like a checklist, and now the terminology that is in vogue and sexy is an SOP, a standard operating
Hmm.
procedure. So you had already had a checklist for transaction coordination, and we could just kind of plug and play and be like, hey, this is the way that we do transaction coordination. And that person was very capable and they can just take it over. So talk about how you did the same thing with listing coordination.
Well, I did it with every aspect of the business has like a workflow. So there's like a sales workflow, there's a listing workflow, there's a pending workflow, and then there's a customer service workflow. They all have different tasks that need to be done. And once you kind of write them out, that's where your checklists come from. And you can kind of assign each one to a person and give that person that checklist. So that's basically what I did with the listing coordinator is she came into the office and I told her all of the things that are, part of this role, and she honestly made the checklist better because she's a capable person. And that's one of the main things of delegating is to make sure that you have a capable person that can take it and make it better.
Yeah. It's like the difference between cul-de-sac talent and capacity talent. So I remember on our journey, we hired cul-de-sac talent and like we had to
Yeah.
tell them exactly what to do and how to do it. And if we didn't, it wouldn't get done. And those
Right.
people
Or they would
lasted
ask me a million questions.
yeah. And those people lasted a very short amount of time. And then once we got capacity talent, it's people that you can truly delegate to and really like let go. So letting go of something is different. Like taking my hands off something is different than taking my eyes off something. So we still keep our eye on it, and we're getting updates from the transaction coordinator once. It used to be back in the day like an Excel spreadsheet where she's letting us know what's going on with all the files on a weekly basis. But we took our hands off it, but not our eyes off of it. So we're still paying attention to it. And then with the listing
Exactly.
coordination, you started to do the same thing, which is where we were talking about this on the walk as well. Like if our bodies are the hardware, our brains are the software. So it's like I have particular software in my brain around systems for sales, you know, and you have these SOPs in your brain or software around operations. And the problem
Mm-hmm.
is for most people, those systems are in their head. And the reason why that's a problem is because they have to be there to run the system. They are the system versus getting
Right.
it out of their head onto a checklist or an SOP. That way somebody else can run it. And then the game is finding somebody that's capable. Is that right?
Correct. And really,
Yeah.
the whole point of a system is to keep the salesperson in there prospecting, lead follow up, going on appointments, negotiating. That was drilled into my head from the beginning. Like, Aaron cannot get into my stuff. He's not supposed to be in any of the admin stuff. I would always yell at you, like, what are you doing? Go away. Go do what you're supposed
Yeah.
to do.
Oh,
That's
100%.
the whole purpose.
If I would sit down in your chair, you'd be like, bro, like, what are you, like, get out of here. Like, you're not supposed to be looking at emails. You're not supposed to be looking at files. It's not your job. So talk a little bit about that because I feel like, again, like for some reason, the operation side of things is not perceived as sexy. Now you make it sexy for sure. What I'm also
Thank you.
aware of, yeah, what I'm also aware of is that like it's a very specialized skill. And when people think real estate, they're just thinking like, oh, I got to sell it. It's like not necessarily. Like if you have a brain for operations like you do and for systems and processes and procedures, like you geek out on that stuff. Like you light up and it's right in your wheelhouse. So um like talk a little bit about why it's important for that role, the operations manager or these people that are on a team to understand that their whole job is to keep the salesperson in production, to keep them in, prospect, lead, follow up, go on appointments, negotiate deals.
Yeah, well, I think most salespeople are not really well equipped to be good at systems. And there's really no point in getting more and more and more sales if you can't service them because your customers are going to be angry. They're going to give you bad reviews. They're not going to give you referrals. So it makes sense to spend time and money hiring the right people to grow your business. Like you're just going to hit a ceiling if all you're focused on is sales. And I think there's two camps. There's the salesperson who wants to do everything and they botch up the whole operation side, or there's a salesperson who doesn't even pay attention to operations. So I feel like the right way to do it is to find the people who are actually capable and passionate about systems, because for us it's like a joy. And for most salespeople, when I say like, "Oh, I really love systems," they're always like, "Oh, I hate systems; they're the worst." And that's because you're not supposed to be doing them. You're supposed to hire someone who is passionate about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny because it makes me think about one of the coaching clients where you guys are reading a book and it's about systems. It's called Traction. And she got on a call with me and she's like, bro, like this is so hard for me to read. Like I have to set a whole vibe and like tea and like candles to like make it to like where I want to read it. and you're over here like geeking out, like this book is fantastic. This is so awesome. Because to your point, it has to do with
I
your natural
know.
disposition.
No, I was going to say that I tried to do sales and I was fine. Like I sold things. I was capable, but I hated it. It was like a visceral response. I cried several times. It was horrible for me. So it's just like you have to realize your unique ability. Your unique ability, Aaron, is you have the vision, you have the big personality, you make relationships, you sell, like it's a whole different ability than mine, which is more logic, systems, organization. And that's why we work so well together because we complement each other. And I feel like one without the other, just it really wouldn't get that far.
Agreed. Like together, I feel like it's not only between me and you, but then other people that we have on the team. If you do that properly and you're putting people in positions that are based on their natural disposition of who they are, it's like we're all one body and like each of us are a different component. And together we become like a super being, like together, right? So that's
Yeah, and
awesome.
it becomes way more fun. I mean, when it was just me and you, it wasn't as fun. Now we have all these other personalities who really thrive in what they're doing instead of me trying to jam myself into a role. We have people who actually love that role, and it just becomes fun when we're all kind of going in the same direction.
As far as like a question that agents ask me all the time around systems is, let's say, because there's different systems that are required for different levels. So if you were to lay out like a roadmap for someone between like, and we'll go through like different stages in terms of their evolution as far as units and volume and things of that nature. But if you were to lay out a roadmap for someone doing like 0 to 20 deals, what would you say like the systems that they really have to focus on are?
Well, I think the no-brainers are the transaction coordinator because you literally pay per deal. So it's not like a big out-of-pocket expense, but it allows you to put something under contract and just kind of forget about it. Like you should not be having to babysit the TC. If you're babysitting that person, you need to find a new one because they need to be able to just hold their own. The other thing is showings, like a showing service. I mentioned it before. If you're spending time trying to coordinate showings, like how are you getting sales? I mean, prospecting, as you know, and getting sales is a full-time job. And those two things I feel like are not high cost and they get back so much in time.
That's really
You
good
can't.
guidance. And for each one of these things, we also talked about this on our walk yesterday in preparation for kind of this conversation. Is that I think part of the mentality too, and I'm curious to see your thoughts, that keeps people from investing in their business is that 65% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. So if you come from that environment, you've got this like DIY mentality, like I need to keep every single penny. And this idea that
Mm,
like I have to keep the whole pie, where what's interesting is that the richest people on planet Earth, they don't own 100% of their businesses. So like Bezos only owns 10% of Amazon, and Elon Musk only owns 20% or 17% of Tesla and SpaceX. So each one of these things you mentioned, a transaction coordinator, that costs money. A showing service or a showing thing, that costs money, right? And maybe paying for like a call rate or something like that, that costs money. At the same time, our experience has been is when you share the pie gets bigger.
right.
And that's something that's like counterintuitive for a lot of people, right? Where they resist sharing any of the pie, but then basically what you're doing is you're limiting to your pie to a particular size. That's
Yeah,
exactly right.
100%.
Because I remember we did jumps, like we went from 17 to 50 and then 50 to 75 and then 89 to 100. So from 20 to 50 as the systems guru, what would you say? Let's say somebody has transaction coordination, they have showing service, they have a phone, routing phones and stuff. What would be the next kind of system or process or hire that they should implement?
Well, I think an administrative assistant to answer the phone is another thing that people need to consider because it's not always the best customer service to wait till the end of the day to have 20 messages and then get back to all of them. So I think that would be really good. And the administrative assistant can really streamline a lot of things. So you can set up a system that's automatic. So when this happens, you send out this email. When this you can teach them how the flow works and they can make it a lot easier. And you can also use them to send, documents to get signed or follow up on appointments, confirm appointments for you. I mean, there's so many things that that person can take off your plate. So I
Yeah.
would say that would be definitely be the next one.
Awesome. And I agree with that 100%. And then for people who always ask me, does that person have to be like in the physical form, like, directly sitting next to you, or can it be a VA, a virtual assistant?
It, I would say it could definitely be a VA. Ours happens to work 5 minutes away from us, but she's in her house while we're in our house. So, I mean, we could definitely do it with a VA as long as they have the capability to answer phones. Then it's fine, and they have computer and internet access for sure.
Yeah, it's less expensive. And going back to your point previously about like if you have systems in place and it's documented on what happens and when it happens, then it's just plug and play. They just have to, and to your point, we really use the executive administrative assistant in many ways. Um, it's like your assistant because you're like the operations manager and you oversee all
Right.
operations. So she answers phones, but she also is your assistant if you ask her to do stuff like she does it, sort of thing. So, okay. And then let's say to go from 50 to 100. What do you think the next system, the next process, the next person?
I think definitely having someone who's a customer service specialist, so someone who can develop the CRM, a customer relation management software. So getting a really good database, and that person keeps in touch with the customers and maybe sends them gifts when the property closes and organizes all of that. I think that was a piece that took us a long time to add, but now that we have that person, it's like, wow, why did we wait so long? So that's definitely an addition. And I think now, in the times that we're in, like a marketing or social media person also could be something to invest in, because attention equals money. I mean, that's how a lot of people are getting sales or just putting their, increasing their brand awareness.
Yeah, I love that. So then what I wrote down here is like, and I think you're spot on there. So from 50 to 100, having like a client care coordinator, which is what we
Yeah.
call that individual. And also starting to really dial in the CRM because to your point, we took an embarrassingly long period of time to like really dial that in. And it's just becoming increasingly important where I think in the past, it was perhaps easier to get away with not doing that. As technology has changed consumers' expectations and speed is exceptionally important. Technology allows you to move with speed, and without it, I don't think you'll be able to continue to compete. And with so many options that are at people's disposal, relationships become increasingly important, and your ability to deliver high level service, not just get it sold. Because I think in the past, my philosophy was like, hey, we helped you sell it. We got you a good price. We did it quickly and efficiently. Like, you're welcome. And what I'm
Right.
aware of is that leads to satisfied clients, but it doesn't lead to raving fans. And satisfied clients leave and raving fans don't. So by having that person in place, and so would you say that that client care coordinator would need to be like tech savvy?
Yes, 100%. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone on your team needs to be a little tech savvy, at least a little, because that's just where it's moving. Everything is digital. There's no paper anymore. I mean, when we started real estate, everything, I had a filing cabinet with papers, and my checklists were actual papers where I would check off, the tasks. Like, if you don't have any technological knowledge, you're going to fall behind.
Yeah, like period, end of story. And one of the things that is interesting is that with a lot of the people that I work with from a coaching capacity, that's really what we're helping them with is helping them to change their mental map around tech, helping them to integrate it more into their business. And it's in addition to the proactive and aggressive like prospecting and stuff. But without that other piece, to your point, I think you'll continue to fall behind. And I guess I'm wondering because I'm aware that we also had a conversation, and you mentioned it now, about systems and them evolving from tech, excuse me, from like, like paper to tech. And, with SOPs, like now what we're doing is shooting videos to document and screenshots. So can you talk a little bit about that and why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, a pro tip in systems is to document them so that when someone else joins the team, you literally just be like, watch these videos that we made on it. It just really decreases the training time. And with technology now, I mean, I use the BombBomb video screen recorder. It's so easy. You just press record and it will record your screen while you're doing something, and it records your voice over it. And I've shown people how to do paperwork on it. I've shown people how to use DocuSign on it. I mean, it's just a great tool. And I think that not only having checklists, but also having video of how you do things it's great when you're hiring.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right as far as onboarding, because it not only does it help with your ability to be able to plug and play with staff, because you will have like a natural churn. I mean, we don't have that much churn because I think we treat people fairly and
Because
are
we're
easy to
awesome.
work with. Yeah, because we're awesome. We don't micromanage people. But there's just going to be a churn, and without having documented systems in general, then I just have to spend a lot of time training people, and as a result, I think people have a tendency to settle for admin staff because they don't want to fire them and start over.
Right.
Which really, if there's somebody who's slowing you down, like they're really slowing everything down, right?
Right.
So I think that makes sense. And then if you add on to it, the way I've described it to people, it's like, well, what's the largest search engine in the world? And they're like, it's Google. I'm like, all right, what's the second largest search engine in the world? It's YouTube. And it's like, why is it YouTube? Is because we're moving toward, like, it's not just like tell me, it's like show me. So it's like if I
Right.
was doing an instruction, let's say I'm putting something together for Sebastian or Liliana, a toy, I'm going to look for like 2 minutes at the instructions, and then I'm going to Google like how to put that toy together. And I'll put that particular model, and a video will show up of some person, putting together that toy. And by watching the video, I'll figure it out.
Yeah, and the added bonus is you can watch it 10 times if you need to. If you can watch it when you're doing it the first time, and then maybe you won't do it again for 2 weeks, just you watch the video again instead of calling me and asking me 50 questions. How did we do this again? So it's a win-win.
Yeah, it's totally true. And then also having a place like a repository where those videos are going, because that's what we're in the process of creating, is like a university of sorts, where we have a repository of all, let's say like on the sales side, here's all the videos to teach you, like, how to present, how to set appointments, how to pre-qual, how to, do those things. And then we also have a repository of all the operations videos, which again makes it very easy to plug and play with staff as they, as far as like an onboarding process is concerned.
Yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm working on a class right now for systems, which would be, of course, our coaching clients and our downline would get it for free, but it's something that anybody can use to learn how to build their own systems.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And that's coming from just a request, because we've had lots of people like ask about like, hey, like, is there anything like on systems or anything training for like, admins or things of that nature. So, I think a lot of people are going to get tremendous value from our time together. So is there anything else you would want to impress upon the agents that are listening about systems, about the right person to help them with systems? Because I think that's really important too. Like any additional guidance that you would give?
Well, I would just say to really think about what type of person each role requires. Like an administrative assistant, for example, doesn't need a lot of like human interaction, but they need to be very detail oriented and be good on the phone. Whereas a transaction coordinator has to be like thick skin, tough as nails, have a lot of knowledge in certain things, and also be very good on the phone. A listing coordinator isn't going to talk to anybody, so they could be very socially awkward. As long as they are very detail oriented and are good with technology, they'll be fine. So it's just kind of really thinking about what type of person would love this job, because that's the goal, is to find someone who gets it, wants it, and has capacity. So they understand the job, they like the job, and they're capable emotionally, physically to do it.
Yeah, that's really good guidance. And then there's also, because we're beginning to like explore that and learn that as far as like the hiring process, where I think we have done it just based on like performance, and we've happened to surround ourselves with people that are exceptionally capable. And now it's like being intentional with that. So being clear on what the position is in operations that I'm looking for, then like giving like like a personality assessment to see, which we did recently for you, and you came out specialist, which is like, well, duh, like of course, and you
Yeah,
came out like precise and like organization. It's like, well, yeah, that's why you thrive in that environment, right? So understanding what the position is, and then making a data driven decision based on personality assessments and based on cognitive scores and things of that nature, so that way you can put the right person in the right seat.
exactly. And the person has to also go with what your company values are and what your culture is. And that's a whole nother discussion, but it matters that they fit into what you're trying to do and what kind of, people you vibe with.
Yeah, that's 100% true. And I'm super excited to see the completion of your class. I'm also super excited to, kind of work with you when we do that live class together coming up here shortly. So, listen, babe, I appreciate you. I know you know that. I think you're magnificent, fantastic, wonderful. You're just an awesome human being. And I think people are going to get a lot of value. So, if they want to find you somewhere, where can people connect with you?
Yeah, well, they can follow me on Instagram at Elite Builder Ladies, or you can just email me admin@thenovellogroup.com.
Appreciate you, babe. You're the best. Love you. Look forward to doing this more often. I'll talk to you soon.